And I'll do another sound check right now, too.
There we go.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Oh, is that a Yingling? Oh, man. See, God, now you're making me jealous because we don't have those here on the West Coast. We don't have it in California.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 51. Bob from RetroRGB, and here he is. Bob, how you doing, man?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me on. These are always a blast to do.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. First thing I gotta say is just actually a big thank you for helping me spend loads of money over the past, 5 or 6 years. There's no better site, than for this. So,
hopefully it was a help. And the two most common things people tell me when I meet them at meet and greets, expos, and all that stuff. The number one thing is almost always, I wish I found your site sooner. I could have saved so much money. And by the way, do you have any idea how much money I've spent because of your podcast? So no. Yeah, I sorry and thank you.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's no better way. I'd rather spend my money than on this stuff. So it's actually great. It really works out perfectly. And I honestly, I feel like your site has just been such an invaluable resource. And we're going to dive into it in just a little bit. But I want to take it first back a little bit. And I'm sure you get this question quite often. But, what kind of is there a game that hooked you in early on as a kid that kind of got you started into gaming? And, what game of that or console or system?
I mean, it was just kind of always part of my life. I grew up, I think the first computer my parents got, I was 4 years old or something like that.
Oh, man.
And it was a Tandy 1000. And I just remember my dad was copying a disc, which it sometimes, depending on the compression, would take 20 minutes to copy a floppy disk, a 5 1/4 inch floppy. And he said, just don't touch it. I'm running into the store. And of course, I was a little kid. I just wanted to turn the lever. I turned the lever, the light went out. I turned the lever, the light went back on. And then I had to tell my dad when he came home what I did. He laughed it off. So it was just, ever since then I was fascinated. And, early games were definitely King's Quest, which of course I never beat at that young of age. But, Zaxxon, I remember us having. I don't even know where that came from. And there was one Icon Quest for the Ring, which was imagine if Zelda was made 6 years earlier. So it was, terrible by today's standards, but it was kind of neat. It was kind of fun. Just, nerd stuff's always been a part of my life. So is car racing and American football as well, which is weird. I just, talk about not ever really fitting in, but yeah, just gaming, nerd stuff. It's always just kind of been there. And then once the 3D graphic stuff started coming out, some was amazing and some was just... it reminded me of that game, Icon Quest for the Ring. You finally get to a screen that's not even 8 bits probably, and it's a slightly different color than the last. And you go, oh, I found a secret area, and you have to use your imagination. And a lot of the really bad 3D graphics, or I shouldn't say bad, but bad by today's standards, the early 3D graphics, it's what the heck am I looking at? And then you have to really use your imagination. And I just felt so many awesome games had reached a point in the 16 and I guess 32-bit era where you could just lean back and enjoy the games. So I think I didn't get into a lot of that middle chunk of gaming for a while, but now there's plenty of 2D adventure games out there, even on modern consoles. So I'm back with those.
I would even argue that I think that's one of the reasons so many of these games have stood the test of time. There's so many classics that you can still pick up today on Super Nintendo, for instance, Chrono Trigger, Super Metroid. These are games that are still awesome experiences nowadays. And I think that's a testament to how well they were originally designed and for those platforms and everything. It's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, even the original even the first 3 Super Mario Brothers games. You plug them in, you press a button, and you start playing. And you die a bunch of times to figure it out, and then before you know it, you're blowing through level 1 so quickly it doesn't even feel like a level anymore. But it doesn't take too long, so it's like the perfect training area, if you will, and stuff. And yeah, we don't get a lot of that anymore outside of cell phone games or Android style games or anything, which stinks because sometimes those are the most fun to play.
So, that brings up a good point, and that classic style, it's pretty awesome nowadays where we're getting, mostly in the indie scene, but we're seeing all of these retro-inspired games that develop. I mean, Celeste is a great example of just a game that's really reached a wide audience, but it's obviously inspired by those games like you're mentioning, like those really hard games back on Nintendo and NES and that era of gaming. I guess, so, one of the things that I think kind of you have to have ingrained in you if you're going to go down retro hardware and start trying to play some of your old consoles on modern TVs and things is this curiosity for what's past the console, what's beyond the game. And I'm curious if there was ever a point in your life where you started getting curious about like, how does my Nintendo work? How does my Sega Genesis work? Is there a point where you became more curious than just the video playing the game itself?
Oh, from day one. I've been taking stuff apart since I was a kid, trying to figure out how it worked, which, pre 10 years old meant I took stuff apart and broke them. But,
right.
It's,
Totally.
yeah, always. And then I did hardware design as part of a company I worked with for a long time. It was my favorite job I've ever had, other than RetroRGB, of course. And it's, so anything that's like nerd based, especially hardware based, that involves some kind of creativity is what really does it for me. So when I just kind of re-stumbled across these old consoles and kind of started figuring out ways to upgrade them, it ticked all the boxes. I got to work with people designing amazing hardware. It involved being creative in how I present the reviews and the stuff that I talk about. I get to write a bunch of stuff. I always liked writing, and it just kind of does everything for me. And oh, by the way, the fact that it's nostalgic, that doesn't mean shit after like the first month, or if you're playing the game after the first minute, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just about like, I think I could do the same thing in any computer hardware field that I liked even a little bit and be just as passionate about it. It just so happens that, oh, by the way, I have my entire life's history of playing these games, so I happen to know quite a lot about it. So.
What did you first then start? I mean, what were some of your first tinkers or first mods or things that you messed around with when it came to gaming or computers or anything like that?
I mean, there's so many, but the ones that definitely stand out are anybody old enough will remember those. So some TVs had little screws on the top that you would have these little fork connectors and stick them underneath and screw the screws down, and then you would screw the RF connector to the back. And anytime those little fork things would fall off, people would freak out and be like, oh, what do we do now? It's broken. Sorry, by the way, there's nothing I could do about those sirens.
Totally fine.
Live, everybody. That's what you get. So I just remember being in third grade or something and asking for a pair of pliers, and because they couldn't get the TV working and just to play a video. And I remember just cutting the ends off, and the teacher's eyes are bugging out, like watching me cut these off. And I trimmed some plastic, and then I twist the wires, wrapped it around, screwed the thing down, and the thing worked. And the teacher was just like, I don't know what the hell's going on right now. And I just, other nerds in the class obviously knew what I was doing, even at that age. But stuff like that since day one, basically.
Even to this day, there is something terrifying about cutting a wire, and I don't know what it is. But even if I'm just trying to strip the ends and trying to get a connection or whatever, it still scares the shit out of me every time I do it.
You can't uncut it. I can't tell you how many times I'll buy stuff very specifically just to cut open, like $2 Amazon cables and stuff, just to make something out of, and I still will hold up the cutter to it and go, is there anything else I could be using this for? Like, am I really gonna? And then, but yeah, I totally understand.
No, it's a really good point. And then how does all of that, how does that lead you to, what was the original idea, or how did that lead you to starting RetroRGB then?
Well, the idea kind of came out around organically because I got a Wii and then the Virtual Console games, and I thought, this is really cool, but, something's just not right about this. And then I discovered some really terrible controller adapter that lets you use the original Genesis, Super Nintendo, and original NES controllers on the Wii. And I started playing it that way, and it was on a plasma TV, so while it's not a CRT, it does have that unique look, so it wasn't, it was kind of cool still. And, just something else didn't feel right. And in hindsight, it was definitely lag, both controller lag, emulation lag, and, the whatever early plasma TVs had, probably 3 or 4 frames of lag on it. But I just kind of said, well, this stuff's got to be dirt cheap now. So why don't I just go to my parents' house and pull an old CRT out of the basement and then start buying used new consoles off of eBay. And I did that, and everything was cool. I made something I called the Retro Cart. I still have pictures of it up on the site just for the heck of it. And I thought I was done. I was like, well, this is cool. This is like every game I ever wanted to play. Plus, I threw a Saturn in there, which I always wanted and never saw. And right as I was about to just kind of leave it in the corner of my house and kind of move along, I went, I distinctly remember somebody at an electronics boutique talking about RGB back in the 90s. And like it was way too. I remember going to Radio Shack and asking about it, and they were just like, "I don't know what you're talking about, but it's gonna be expensive." So I just kind of like, well, let me look into this. And then my cousin Scott, we grew up together. I talked to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I'd be interested in that. I want to build one of these carts too." He still has his, by the way. And we started researching it, and all of the info on how to do any of this stuff was scattered across tons of forums. There was tons of people that talked like they knew what they were talking about, but in hindsight actually didn't. Let me on a wild goose chase. There were other people that were really bad at writing posts, but had some amazing information. And I just said, let me put a Google Doc together that maybe a couple of my friends might like. And then out of nowhere, Scott one day was like, this is like a 40-page document. Why don't you just put it into like a website? And I had run, my first website was called the Emulatorium, which was all about, all the new enhancements in emulators to play NES and SNES on a computer. I was like, I could do that pretty quickly. And, I threw that together, and I actually didn't like how it was. So I then went and redid the entire thing over. It took like a full weekend nonstop. And it was funny because I remember meeting a bunch of people at the very beginning, and they were all like, politely enthusiastic for me, but kind of were like, what a fucking waste of time that's going to be. But they were cool about it. They're like, hey, you do you, and I slapped this thing together, and I hadn't even started promoting it yet. And all of a sudden I looked, and the pages started popping up in Google search results. And I was like, well, let me see what else pops up. And then there's all these people on these forums talking crazy shit about me. And I'm like, oh my God, the website's not even done yet. What's going on? So I'm like,
my God.
Well, I guess it's out there now. Might as well start paying some more attention to it and see what I can do.
Geez, that's brutal criticism before the thing's already up and running.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you can't escape it.
The very first thing I read about me was some guy called me a delusional prick because I said the Dreamcast isn't quite a retro console because some of the 480p games look amazing on flat panels. So, yeah, it was the very first thing. And I'm like, man, it's not going to be this bad all the time, is it? And, yeah. Every day, all day long, but they haven't stopped me yet. So,
well, I gotta say, I gotta at least throw this thanks out there to those early people who did talk shit about it because it's increased the search results for it. So when I first started searching for getting this stuff onto my own setup going, your site's the first one that pops up, and it's really. I mean, I started off the conversation like this, but it's been an invaluable resource, and I don't know if it was. It sounds like that's what it kind of was early. Like that was the intent of it because it's got so many great guides. The intent of it was
to be a resource for Scott and I. Honestly. And I mean, we both joke about how often whenever we go to do something, it's like, man, I forgot how to do that. Oh yeah, the website. I just go right back and reference the pictures I took and all that stuff. But yeah, that's kind of it's kind of funny how it all goes together. And then that I had that job that I absolutely loved, and that got bought out by just a bunch of assholes, and who eventually tried to get us all to quit, and then eventually laid me off. And I jokingly texted a friend like, hey, you guys need a hardware guy? I'm looking for a job. And they're like, all right, call the boss tomorrow. So like, okay. And the job really entailed like write these operating systems for deployment, for still the same sort of stuff I was in, and then sit by your computer and make sure that you're there when we need you. So it was kind of one of these, like, you are paid to make sure that you are always there and you get shit done as quickly as possible and as best as you can, and read a book or something while you wait.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I took that opportunity to do the website, and always wanted to record an album for real, not just like a 4-track hanging from a basement. So I ended up doing that, played a bunch of live gigs. It was frustrating because I never had a day off. I still haven't actually, but didn't have a day off for the entire like 6 years I was doing that because I was always on call for that company and then always working on this stuff. But I would have never had the time to do RetroRGB if I had a job where I was in an office all day long and couldn't have worked on it. So that kind of worked out. It's everything kind of fell into place there.
It sounds like a grind because you're still on the grind. I mean, it's kind of wild, but at least it's obvious something that you're passionate about. It seems like you still continue to be passionate about even 6 years later, working every damn day on it. So when you first started out the site, what was your inventory of retro stuff like? I mean, did you own 10 consoles at this time, or were you trying to just get one specific console to work on the TV?
And in fact, I have a distinct memory of my wife and I don't even think we were married at the time. Like, she said, all right, well, let's go out to brunch today or something, and I'm hungry. I'm like, all right, great. I'm going to bring you to this awesome place. Let's skip breakfast. Let's have a big brunch. But I really want to stop off at like two things first. So just like be patient. And then I ended up stopping off at Retro Games Plus. I became friends with the owner of that, Chris, who's been wonderful to me over the years. And then later on that day, I stopped, or right before we went to eat, I stopped at a friend's house and picked through his basement to find a bunch of old Super Nintendos that he had collected, and got him home, and ended up, one of them was the one chip, the one that I was looking for to do this test to see if it really was sharper than the others. So it was one of those like, I promise, I swear that being late to brunch was absolutely worth it. You have no idea what I'm going to do with this thing. And I mean, it was actually the truth. So
it's one of those nice little side effects. You mentioned you live in New York. I'm here. I'm about half an hour outside of LA, and we have a bunch of retro stores and shops, and they've been around actually for a little while now. But I know other parts of the country, they don't have access to these kind of things, and so you can't have tests, you can't see all the availability of all these consoles or even arcades or anything like that. So it's nice to be able to be in an area that has that kind of stuff. What was the first arcade machine you ever owned?
I've only actually owned one, and it was a Mortal Kombat machine, and it was one of these like. I looked at the pictures online. I rented the U-Haul to go get it, and I got there, and the guy tried to like haggle me up on the price. I hate haggling so much; it drives me nuts. And Scott was there with me, and I was just like, I was so mad. And I was like, I already rented the van, so whatever. And I got it home, and my buddy was waiting for me. And I was in panic mode because I was like, it's bigger than I remembered it. Are we gonna get it into the apartment? Like, what's gonna happen if we can't get it in? It was just the right size, so it slid in. It wasn't even that challenging. And the Mortal Kombat had wheels on the back, so you could like tilt it backwards and roll it. And I ended up putting a MAME PC in there. And I would occasionally switch back and forth between original PC and the MAME PC, running pretty decent emulation, actually. It was a pretty fast processor in there for the time. And then that was pretty much it. I ended up having to sell that when I moved. I eventually picked up a Neo Geo cabinet that I got it for $400. I was so happy with the price. And then I got scumbagged on the delivery. They ended up making me carry it anyway, which I think is one of the reasons I ended up blowing my back out. And that thing was just a nightmare because the cab was great. There was nothing wrong with the cab. The tube was even in excellent condition, but like, this is at a time period where I had an office that had like 2 vertical staircases, and I had nowhere to put it. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with it. I ended up putting it at my buddy John's chicken restaurant. He's in the chat here, actually. And then a friend of mine, Jose, fixed it up and sold it to somebody else. So, yeah, that was my second cab, but I don't know if I actually consider that like my cab because I barely had a chance to play it. And by the time I actually got the Darksoft cart, the multi-cart that had, you're able to put all the ROMs on it and play all the games, the area that I had my office was turned into a makeshift movie studio. It was weird. So there was a couple of just awful people in there that like were just so mean to me, and I paid rent, so I had kind of a bad attitude about it. So maybe maybe my vibes kind of deserved that, but then this one very cool movie production studio came in, and Depraved is the name of the movie, by Larry Fessenden, I think, was the director and writer, and they were freaking awesome. They were in the middle of a shoot, and I was like, hey, can I just get in to grab something? And they were like, do you want us to stop the shoot right now, or can you wait a couple minutes? Like, they were so cool. And I got to talking to this to the guy, Larry, and he was like, whoa, what the hell do you have in there? And I was like, come on in and check it out. And he's like, could I put that in our movie? I'm like, yes, you can. Are you kidding? So we wheeled the Neo Geo machine out, stuck it in, and it's in the background of one of the scenes in the movie. And it's
so
actually
cool.
a pretty decent horror movie. So yeah. So it was kind of neat. It was, the office served its purpose, but oh man, did that play out after a while. So.
I got to tell you, so both my parents are from New York. My dad's not Long Island. My mom's from Queens. And you're confirming all of these stereotypes I have of New York. Like, it's a pain in the ass to buy something, move it across town, get it up to your apartment. Like I just hear all these things. It's tough for me to imagine because we're in the suburbs and it's like, it's really spread out around here. But it sounds like it could be an extra chore on top of just trying to find the cab in the first place to actually own an arcade machine there.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, and it's one of those things. Like I bought one of my friends' Beasts has a cab, like a small sit-down Sammy. I forgot what the name of the cab was, but it's neat. It's a smaller one. It's something like I could easily just like lift up one end, put it on a dolly, and be able to lift it myself. Two people could definitely push it up the stairs. Two people that are normal size, not Beast size. It actually took Beast to get the Neo Geo cab down those stairs, and a bunch of people were kind of being, I don't know what the right word to use is. So let's say not helpful.
Yeah,
and
challenging,
Beast was like,
difficult.
Get out of the way. And he steps on the bottom of it, and he walks it down the stairs one step at a time going down. Giant motherfucker that he is. But
yeah, right.
Yeah, I'd be able to do this pretty much myself and with a buddy without having somebody giant in there to help. So, but that's still at his place. I have no way to pick it up. I have no place to put it. So, and with lockdown and everything else, it's one of those like, when do I go? What's the right time to go? So that's on my list of things to do, hopefully somewhat soon.
The one thing I love about all these stories you're highlighting is like the social experience that goes along with retro and with the collecting aspect of it, but also some of these other aspects to it. And it's one of the things I got to be honest, I'm missing the most. I've self-quarantined quite a bit here. I don't go out anywhere. My parents are both older and they have health problems, so I still want to go see them, and I don't want to get them sick. So I've been that person, and it's the one thing I think I've just been missing the most is how social gaming can be, and just these fun stories about trying to get shit upstairs and stuff.
Yeah, the social aspect was so weird and amazing at the same time. I've told the story a bunch of times. My apologies to my friends who are listening to this, but I walked into Next Level in Brooklyn at one point, and I don't think it was the Too Old Too Furious tournament, but it might have been. It was one of those like retro tournaments that was set up with all modern equipment, so it was played on BVMs and PVMs, but streamed digitally and through calibrated OSSC, which at the time it might have even gone up to only 720p. But there was, if you walked into the room and you closed your eyes, you might get scared because you hear people angry and pissed off and yelling at each other. But you open your eyes and you look around, and it's like there's every type of person and everybody is getting along. It's just like, do you like games? Cool. Are you going to get mad if you lose the game? All right, you're in. Fine. And that's it. It's like the only prerequisite for fitting in is don't be a horrible douchebag like the games that we do. And that's it. And I just thought it was the coolest. Like, it was weird to feel welcomed. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah. So it was very, very cool. And it's kind of always been like that at a lot of these tournaments. Some of the games and specifically draw interesting crowds, but mostly retro stuff for people that actually really care because, like I mentioned before, nostalgia gets you the first 5 minutes, or it gets you something shiny in the corner that, that you like to talk about, but actually playing these games is what brings you back. And it's harder to play retro. There's always something breaking. There's always something to do. So generally people that love it, they're there to play and they're there to have fun, but it's the games that keep them there.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that leads to where I'm going next with this. Is that one of the things I've noticed that you've talked about and continue to be actively advocating for is this preservation of these games. And to your point, the nostalgia for them is only going to go so far. We need to play these. We want to be able to play these games, 30 years from now. Has there been some, innovations or inventions or things that you've seen that have really helped preserve and keep some of these games, in the form that we kind of originally hoped that they would be?
When it comes to consoles, the number one thing that we've got in the retro gaming community is Greg Collins, the owner of Laser Bear. I always make the joke that he's saving our consoles one piece of plastic at a time, and while I'm trying to be funny, it's 100% serious. He's concentrated so much on these no-cut mods that it makes such a big difference because, there's always the crew that's, well, I own it and it's my thing and I could do whatever I want with it. But a lot of this stuff is going to outlast us. And, when whatever format is out there, when we're using 10K or 20K or, holographic images, composite S-video, RGB, and HDMI aren't going to mean anything. And now you're just going to have consoles with holes cut in them. And I still see that all the time. It just drives me nuts when I see a Master System with a giant hole cut for, composite video and mono audio. And it's just like, You don't even need that. All you needed was a cheap cable. Like, what do you? So I think that people putting the efforts in to preserve the hardware has been pretty tremendous. I do think too that on the software side, a lot of efforts more behind the scenes than anything else have been made to preserve this. Because it's not like you could legally set up something that says, hey, we have all the ROMs here, don't worry, they're preserved. But the behind-the-scenes work that's been done with that's great. There's a couple, some totally private that I'm not supposed to talk about, and some very public that everybody talks about, groups that are into this stuff. It is kind of funny, too, because somebody, I do hear very often one of the groups, people say, well, what do? They ask for donations, and they always talk like they do stuff, but like they don't do anything. They do. They just can't really talk about the important stuff that they do, or they get sued. So, it's a tough thing to figure out. And it's weird too, because like in the music industry, they figured it out and ended up screwing all the artists over. So music lovers have no problem getting what they want, but the artists kind of get shafted. So I could understand why the movie and game industries didn't follow suit, but there's got to be a way to solve it. There absolutely has to be. It's just money being thrown away and people just being annoyed. How many people do you think absolutely love these old games, but either don't have the skills to hack anything or don't want to? They got a family and a job, and they don't want to spend their free time hacking. They want to spend their free time playing, which is why the NES Classic and the Genesis Mini, even though it was kind of a turd, that it sold really, really well because it's just a plug and play way to get these. And I really think if there were devices out there that ranged from basic software emulation to really great FPGA recreation that allowed you to just buy the games that you wanted, I think the audience is just limitless, because none of this stuff has a shelf life. Like, your favorite song might be something that was made years before you were even born, but that doesn't make it less of a cool song. And it's the same thing with these games. So.
And, to another issue, I think also facing that, because I couldn't agree with you more once again, but that in, a lot of copyright law is different globally. And as we've seen retro tech and the expansion of all the, like you're saying, mini devices and everything around the world, the laws for copyright and IP, they're different every place that you go to. So that's a further complication in trying to preserve the software side of things. And to your point, it's great. I think that we've seen the hardware emulation start to really evolve, like we saw emulators and software emulation happen, 10 or 15 years ago. And I think it's been fun to observe, but also great to use. Like, this stuff is really working well nowadays, and probably, I assume, is only going to get better at this point. The Mister, I think, is just something everyone talks about, but it's just amazing what that thing's capable of.
The crew working on the Mister project are just phenomenal people that are like, the fact that you could play a Sega Genesis game in RGB on an RGB monitor, but have everything that's supposed to be blending when you're using composite video have only that stuff blurred, but the rest of the stuff sharp. It's a silly example, but it's the best example in how you could absolutely have a better experience, an arguably better experience at least, than the original now. And it's kind of the first time anything like that's ever been really achieved, because there's a ton of stuff you could do with software emulation, and that's just nuts. Any of the stuff from BeastNess and all of that, that one developer... That awesome developer keeps changing his name. I don't want to disrespect him by calling him a different name now, but the stuff they've done is just nuts. But there's still a lot of issues that go into that. Do you have the right computer? Do you have to set it up? Do you have the right controller? And Mister is getting to a place where if you could just follow very basic instructions, you could get an experience on a CRT, on a flat panel, whatever, that's equal to or better than the original. There's still a lot of stuff. Respectfully, that project's still by nerds for nerds. But whenever they figure out how to implement a middleman to just kind of make it a little bit easier, it's funny because when you talk to really smart people and you say stuff like that, they go, "What idiot can't figure this out? It's easy enough as it is." And it's like, oh, that's what I'm here for, everybody. Just you stay and be smart, and I'll be sort of only a little bit smart, and just I'll translate, but. They're awesome, so it's just a never ending thing. And it's something that's going to grow too, because even Hotego, one of the great developers that's brought us the Capcom cores and stuff like that, every once in a while he'll go back and go, let me look at my old cores, and now that I've had another 6 months to learn, let's see if I could find old bugs and fix them. And even little stuff like that, I imagine we're going to get a bunch of college kids looking to get into FPGA programming and go, well, here's a fun project with no negative consequences if I screw it up. So let's see if I could, make this chip more accurate and learn how to apply that to something I'll do for a living. And we're actually getting a bunch of those in. There's a whole new wave of young people that are enthusiastic for all the right reasons.
And the one of the other things that I really appreciate, you mentioned it, but like the Mister seems like it gets an update every single day. I mean, there is constant development going on through all the cores, new cores, supporting all of these wide range of consoles and systems, and it's just it shows you how much the community has picked up and run with it. And to your point, though, it can be a little bit complicated, but I think it's getting less with every iteration. It seems like it's getting less complicated to get up and going on the Mister.
It is one of the biggest problems. I'm using cheesy air quotes here, but one of the biggest problems with the Mister is that it could be a really near perfect recreation of classic computers, including up to 486 processors. Oh, wow. It could be a near perfect recreation of just standard game consoles or handhelds or arcades. So it's, how do you have the perfect Mister setup? Do you buy 4 of them and set them all up different? Do you try to have a flat panel with a keyboard, mouse, and controller sitting there? And that is a wonderfully unsolvable problem. So, and there's people coming up with different ways and coming up with new accessories pretty much daily with that stuff. And I love to see all of it.
There's a good question in the chat, and I think this actually kind of leads to the next interesting point or kind of discussion thing here is that, do you think that the PS2 will get an HDMI mod soon? And I think that is also maybe in the context of, is there really going to be any limitation to what we see? Because it seems like people... way smarter than me, because I'm not a hardware or a software person. Unfortunately, I have to rely on others. And so, do you think we'll see an HDMI mod on PS2? But then also, I think we're going to keep seeing, it seems like every month there's something new coming out.
So the same crew that did the Dreamcast and the original PlayStation HDMI mod is also working on one for the PlayStation 2. I think they said it might be out at some point this year, but I don't like to put deadlines on stuff like this. There's always, in fact, that's why I do not talk about projects that aren't officially announced, because even if you get something 99.9% done, how do you know that you're not going to find a last minute bug, or how do you know the shells aren't going to get stuck in shipping or something? So I try not to talk about that, but they have already, so I'm not outing them or anything. So yes, it's being done. They were going to do that first, but then they decided to do the PlayStation 1 first, which ended up being a really smart move, because there's features they want to implement in the PS2 that would be neat, but totally unnecessary with the PS1, whereas it would be an integral part of the HDMI mod in the PS2. So that is coming. And no, there is no limit, but there is a philosophical question, if you will, as to when does it stop being original hardware then? Because there are some consoles that technically can't have an HDMI mod. You would actually be doing an analog to digital conversion right on the board, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but not many people would want to deal with that when you could get an RGB cable and an amazing scaler for no work at all. So and there are people that have done it, unfortunately too, most of the people that have done it have taken those really crappy composite HDMI scalers, glued them in, and said, look, I made an HDMI Genesis. So there is a really negative stigma with those kind of mods anyway, but there might be ways of saying, and I'm half talking out my ass here, so don't quote me on this, but there might be ways of saying, let me remove the main chip from an older console that can't have a digital to digital mod, and let me replace that chip with a cheaper FPGA that, rather than try to do the whole console, it just recreates that chip, and I'll get HDMI out of that. So that's possible, but first, why would you work on that when you could potentially just be working on adding to the Mister project and all that stuff? And also, is that still the original console then? And does that even matter? And I don't know if there's a right answer to any of that stuff, but it is a conversation worth having at least. And it's getting to the point now for me where with the original consoles, I kind of want to keep them as stock as possible. So like original Genesis, there's a new way potentially to get rid of the jail bars, but keep composite video. I probably just outed a project. Sorry. And, like stuff like that. Like I'd rather, adding the 75 ohm resistors to a one chip Super Nintendo. Like you could call them mods, but you're really not changing anything about the console, and it's 100% reversible and all that stuff. So I'd almost rather see the original consoles just kind of embraced for what they are, for my setup, and then use the Mister for everything else, and then test these mods as they come in. So that way I have all of my original consoles that I could reference, so I could say, here's how much better this looks, and here's what we could do. And then if you have your favorite console, like for me it's the Super Nintendo, like yes, I would always want a second Super Nintendo with all these crazy mods so I could use the original cartridges and hook them up to original TVs, but have them look as incredible as possible. So, but there's no right answer, which is awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, dang. I'm muted on this. Sorry about that stream, folks.
Hit.
I pressed the cough button and now, good evening. Now, I just pointed out that I primarily speed run on TurboGrafx 16, and we don't have to do a lot to get a great RGB signal out of that console. And I know that every console isn't built the same, so that solution doesn't work well for every other console. But the more that we create solutions like that, the more, first of all, I think people will be willing to support that because it's plug and play. But then, secondly, the better it is, to your point about conservation and everything.
Yeah, the TurboGrafx is an interesting console too, because either that or the PC Engine variants of it, you can just plug in the Spark plug is the newest one. It's a basic output, but really high quality. DB Graphics Booster, Renee's been killing it with that since day one. And then, of course, the SSD S3 that does that and a million other things. They're good, but they're limited by the console. And if you could do basic modding, you could replace 2 surface mount capacitors. If you're a beginner, it's probably an hour, just because you have to be really patient and really careful. If you're an expert, you could probably do it drunk with one eye closed and have it come out flawless. But in order to do that, you would be able to then get a really awesome picture. And it's kind of interesting, because with a lot of these original consoles, like there's always one minimum thing. And it's funny too, because all of those consoles that have the pins on the back, so not the Duos and not the Express, the portable ones, the rest of them, they actually have digital video pins. And there's only been one person so far that's created an adapter, and it's way too expensive, and it's just okay. I actually met that person. It was a little frustrating. Let's be polite and say it was frustrating. And so it's funny, because that's the one console or console series that you kind of have to do a mod if you're going to use an RGB out, but there could potentially be a full digital solution, and you could even break that off to RGB as well that doesn't require any modding. So sorry, I don't mean to get too nerdy in this. I just thought that was kind of like a fascinating example.
As a person who has one, I appreciate that example. There's one that, speaking of all these hardware things, and I'm curious, now that you've been observing and reporting and doing all these things over the course of years now, was there like an invention or a device or something, that innovation that happened that you were like, holy shit, this changes everything? Or has it been just like maybe a slower course? I'm curious about how you've observed it now as we're a few years
something
back.
Maybe coming next month that absolutely made me think
what
that.
A tease! No, it's good, totally fine.
Seriously, I'm annoyed
cool.
that I don't my policy of never talking about it. Like I want so badly to scream like, holy shit, this is going to change everything. And in fact, that's pretty much the beginning of the whole video that I'm working on about it. But awesome. Before this was the OSSC, definitely, which is hysterical, because when that came out, Marcus was basically like, I kind of think maybe I could do this. It's going to be all right. Let's see how it comes out. And by the way, here's the most it could ever do. And since then, he has surpassed that this is as far as it could go line like 6 times now or something. His work has been absolutely phenomenal. And in fact, the OSSC Pro is going to be another tool that It's going to be very expensive, so it's not something everybody in the retro gaming world is going to go out and buy. But if you're an enthusiast and you want every option you could imagine, this is going to be the tool to end all tools. I mean, it's going to do every combination of anything that you could want, I think that's going to be a game changer. And the only reason I'm not like doing backflips over that is just the price. So it's not going to be the thing everybody owns, but it's going to be the thing every enthusiast owns. Just like a really good tool set or something like that.
It's interesting you say that because it's really what feels like changed my whole perspective on what is possible when I picked up an OSSC. I couldn't get a FrameMeister at the time, so the fact that there was this alternative, and then I'm looking at it on my TV, and it's mind-boggling how good it looks through this device, and it's. I found it. I know that it can be as complicated and as sophisticated as you want, or it can kind of just work out of the box. Like there's not. Yeah. It's got this great range of being whatever you kind of want it to be. And I have to. The interviews I've heard you've done with Marcus, like it sounds like that was kind of its intent. Like if you don't know what you're doing, this will work great. But if you do, hey, guess what? This thing is for you as well. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's kind of my job, which I haven't always done the best job of, but it's kind of my job to be the middleman and say, and make sure I address who I'm talking to. So you, the speedrunner who is going to be streaming these, and you're probably, especially if you have a record run, you're going to want to have that footage look as good as humanly possible. You want to hold that up, and with your middle finger in one hand and the footage in the other, and be like, look what I did. So that's important then, for it to look as good as it can without slowing down or speeding it up, without changing anything to do with the run. So to spend the time getting a good shielded RGB cable and dialing in phase and setting the correct aspect ratio, your average person doesn't want to deal with that. But when you've done it, then you hit save and you never have to do it again. You just go back to TurboGrafx, Super Nintendo, whatever. Now you could have a really amazing looking stream. So when my friends and I that are really into that go back and forth, sometimes beginners hear us talk and think, so that's what I have to do to play TurboGrafx, when all you actually have to do is plug it in and set it to 2x and then step up until your TV doesn't like the signal anymore. So it's a little tinkering, but anybody could do it. If you could work a TV remote, you could do that. So it's I always try to make sure I address who I'm talking to, because I also have said plenty of times, like, if you want to use the OSSC, just plug it in. And I've had professional streamers come back and be like, whoa, you don't want to just plug it in. Like, you want your streams to look good. And it's all fair. It's all just, I try to make sure I'm clear as to who I'm addressing these days.
I got to tell you, it's super helpful. I've noticed over the past, I know it's been longer than a year, but I've really noticed the content over the last year or so about latency and input lag and all these things that obviously speedrunner, so it affects what we do pretty heavily. But I think it actually does. It can and does, and you've mentioned this. It can affect the casual experience too. So it's not. It's not. You don't have to just ignore that. That's something you might want to consider as well if you're more of a casual person.
Yeah, there's definitely a few different ways to look at that. And by the way, the change in the past year has been shockingly because of the comment section, and I actually mean that in a really good way. And it's just a lot of times people take the time to actually form a thought in the comments, which is so appreciated. But I'll hear something like, hey, at 4 minutes and 30 seconds you mentioned how lag was bad. What do you mean? And no offense, but how would I know that from this video? And I'm like, you know what, it's an excellent question. So I didn't have the time to make super high production ones, so I've just been making a bunch of videos when relevant, like, here's what lag looks like through all of these scalers, here's what it looks like in a mini console and all that. And the biggest misconception that I hear all the time, in fact, some famous YouTuber stole a clip out of one of my videos and lied about what I said. It's the weirdest thing in the world, but a little bit of lag doesn't matter. That's bullshit. That is 100% depending on the context. Right. So if you have a brand new TV that's got let's use an interesting example. Let's say you go out and you get the new LG CX model TVs, and you got it in game mode, and it's got 9 milliseconds of lag, almost nothing, but you want to turn on BFIs so you get that smooth scrolling, and you really feel like you're getting your $3,000 worth. And so now you're at a frame and a half of lag, but it's always a frame and a half of lag. Like the FrameMeister, it's, it doesn't vary. I mean, speedrunners are probably going to notice any kind of competitive gamers probably will, but you might even be able to adjust your playing to it naturally. Because remember, with lag, you're not reacting. It's reacting to you. So one of the biggest misconceptions is, well, fighter pilots have only been clocked at a maximum time of 100 milliseconds. It's like, yeah, that's actually the perfect example that you fucked up, because it's not fighter pilots' reaction time. It's they see the enemy coming and they know exactly what to do. So they push 50 buttons, grab the stick, and turn it before a second even passes. That's not reaction time. That's your pre-programmed muscle memory. So you could subconsciously reprogram that if the lag's low enough and it's not changing. But you have these devices like these terrible scalers, which should just be outlawed. And I use the analogy, and it's 100% true. If they were essential equipment like thermometers or GPSs, they would all be recalled and destroyed. They would not be allowed to be used. But because they're entertainment devices, and they're not going to set your console on fire, they're allowed to be sold. But some of the ones I did in that video had like 7 frames of lag variable by 4. Like, you cannot finish a game. And if you do, it's just all luck. It just, you're probably not that great at the game, or you're super good at the game. So everything just kind of fell together. And that's when even like 1 or 2 frames of variable lag starts to really make a difference, especially towards the end of the games, especially towards like, or even like Mega Man. That one of my favorite videos is Phone Dork. It's like a 45-minute video that covered 100 different topics, typical Phone Dork style. But there was a spot in the middle where he couldn't do the jumps in Mega Man for the falling platforms. He switches over to a CRT and he nails it on the first try. Like, it was funny and it was entertaining, but it was also the perfect real-world demonstration of what variable lag is like. And a little bit of lag can matter a ton. But display latency is just about the least of my worries these days. If it's consistently, like I was testing a panel that's consistently 4 milliseconds and never really changes. It's like, I don't know if pro gamers would be able to tell. And in fact, Brian from RetroUSB, who made the AVS wireless controller for the NES, tested with pro Tetris players, the ones that do the tournament every year, and had a little software code where he manually would add latency on purpose. And he said 8 milliseconds, half a frame, was when they started not being able to do their moves. So I thought that was really fascinating, that like, you got to be just about faster than half a frame and you probably won't even notice, which is interesting, because then if you have the Mister with a good controller adapter on there, some of the new ones are pretty amazing. Snack is, I think, 0, but even some of the other USB based is like 1 millisecond. And the HDMI scaler, I think I clocked total with a USB controller and with a video out. I think it was a total of 4 or 5 milliseconds of lag. So controller lag, scalar lag onto a flat panel. So it's like, I mean, that is competition quality right there. You could legit have a tournament with that thing on a flat panel that's low lag and be completely fine to go.
From the chat, I feel like some of the cheaper ones would set the console on fire. Yes, that's the problem. Some of them are that badly made. I as a speedrunner, I was hesitant to move away from a CRT because I always felt there that what felt like no delay at all, and hitting that pixel jump at the very last moment when I need to, super important. But through some of your testing, I'm like, wait a minute, let me think about this logically as a human. I don't think I'm going to be able to distinguish, as you're pointing out, 1 millisecond, 3 milliseconds, these infinitesimal times. And when I switched over, because I was running out of desk space, a PVM takes up a huge amount of your desk.
Yes, it does.
And so, which is great. And please forgive me for not no longer using my PVM. But I moved over to an old Samsung flat panel, and with the OSSC, I didn't even notice at all. And I'm doing this 3,000 times. I've played through, the games that I run. So it's like, I think it's so interesting. Also, to kind of tail onto that a little bit, because we have some really cool tools, we can break games down and know how an input reacts to a game and how quickly and stuff. Some games actually do check for when you're pressing an input on certain frames. And so to your point, this variable lag could really affect you literally cannot play a game to its completion. And I'm glad that the videos you've made have been toward, they haven't been, you mentioned the speedrunner, but they're for everyone. This is something that, especially because there are good resources out there and good products out there that can actually, make this as easy to use as possible. So
yeah, and with respect to the pro gamers and to the speed running community, when you accidentally buy this stuff, you're not the problem, because you're going to say this tool does not complete the task that I need to, and you're going to go find another one. The problem is that casual gamer that walks in and says, hey, that stuff came out before I was born, but everybody talks about I like this, so I would like that. Let me give it a try. And they go pick up a Super Nintendo, and they go pick up one of those crappy HDMI cables, and they go, yeah, this wasn't like what people said it was. I guess they must be looking at rose-colored glasses through it. And, I remembered to put my TV in game mode, and I'm using an original controller. Oh, I guess Super Nintendo sucks then, huh? And they're like, why would they ever know that that's the cable? Like, it's not their business. It's not their job. You shouldn't have to go into a game store and question what's on the shelves of the game store, but it's the unfortunate truth, which is why I get so pissed, because not only is that person's experience ruined, but the whole retro gaming community has lost them, including the company selling that shitty cable. So they're never going to get another sale from that person, and neither is anybody else in the retro gaming community, and people's streams aren't going to, might be missing one because they've lost that. Like, selling this crap is just horrendous. And it's to the point now where a few people I know that owned game stores always told me, like, listen, I know what you're saying and I agree with you, but if I only have the good options here, people will walk out the door. People will just assume I'm ripping them off. So I have to have them here. And a bunch of game stores have actually said, no, I'm not doing that. Like, if you want, I could, go down to this place and you could pick up a CRT for $20. And that's you use the composite video cable and you'll be fine, which is a perfectly good experience. But a lot of them have actually stopped with these crappy scalers, especially the ones that were designed for TV signals, but just rebranded as a gaming scaler. Like, you plug the thing into your VCR, it's actually going to look great. It's going to make your Super Nintendo look like garbage, and you're not going to be able to play it because of the variable lag. Yes. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Well, and I think that's actually kind of where I wanted to go next, is how the industry keeps evolving and getting bigger, and we are fortunate to be having a lot more options than we had even just 5 years ago. But on the flip side of that, we're facing I don't know what you would call it, but the influx of cheap shit that sucks, basically. Yeah. I'm trying to think of a better way to say it, but and I guess I wanted to share my, I had a little, whenever the My Life in Gaming guys did the HD Retrovision documentary, I was like, oh man, I got to get these cables. I understand that cables are an important part of making this whole process work. So I went on their website and blah, blah, blah. And they hadn't done a batch yet in a while, or they were behind, whatever happened. So, I emailed the company, and one of the interesting things I found was, like, the owner of the company, Nick, the guy who was on the documentary, emailed me back and was we were talking about cables back and forth.
The mustache himself. Yep.
And it's been cool because I'm glad I got to have them on the podcast. But my point being that a lot of these things are still done by people, like, for lack of a better term, starting it up in the garage. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if that's sustainable. Can we keep that going? Like, is that how it has to be, because we're such kind of a niche market to begin with? I'm curious some of your thoughts on that.
It's kind of funny if the companies that sell garbage instead said, you know what, let's just work with these people that have already made amazing stuff, and let's just ask permission to rebrand it, but we'll make it in quantities of 100,000. So that thing that you sell for $80, we could now sell for 50 or 40, and let me rebrand it. And, you sell through your channel, I'll sell through mine. But by the way, your cost goes down, my cost, like, everybody kind of wins. They could absolutely do that. And they don't, that's not the mentality. And I did an interview with Chris Galizzi from Hyperkin, who genuinely seems like a good person who's trying his best, by the way. But he came right out and said, like, he's battled with them before. Like, you can't release this. Like, this is not good. Like, why? People will buy it. And he's like, but you don't understand. And, like, doesn't matter. People are going to buy it. We're not putting another penny into this thing unless people stop buying it. So it's kind of, the chicken and the egg, right? Why would they stop if people keep buying it? But eventually people are just going to give up on all of that crap. So it is frustrating. There is no end to it, though. But like every other business, if you come up with something awesome, it's going to spark somebody else's awesome idea. And they're not, not necessarily steal it. They're just going to make their own version, and then somebody else is going to make their own version. So it is sustainable, but you got to grow. There is no one product to rule them all in any industry. So.
Absolutely true. You mentioned Hyperkin. They're about 20 minutes away from where I live. They're in Southern California here. And I actually have a controller I like by Hyperkin, but I know that...
Me too. A bunch.
There's some criticism that's rightfully direct. And I think that's that's one of the things I actually appreciate what you do. And I think this is, the only way that things change is we have to either not buy it or buy it. I know it's the basics of economics and everything, but if there's crap out there, it's kind of on us as well, though, to say that, hey, we want to support HG Retrovision is actually a great example of we want to support these great cables and stuff like that. And they have, a high demand for them, rightfully so. And they should, because it's a great product. Right. So let's see. Go ahead.
I just saw in the chat, Dog Developer, I think I said that right, was talking about finding CRTs with getting multiple inputs so you could experience the better quality from things stepping up from RF to composite to S-video to either component or RGB. And the thing that's kind of funny is if you're playing on a CRT, playing on any of those, if you're in a big city, RF, you'll just get interference from everything. But let's just assume you're not in the middle of a big city. Playing on any of those formats is perfectly fine. You might get a little analog interference, but it's fine. It's not bad. And especially for people like speedrunners or any kind of pro gamers, if you want to do a little bit of creative wiring, you could even do something on a budget where you pick up a CRT for free, and then you just wire a composite video output, and then use one of those garbage cheap adapters to go RGB to HDMI for your streams. It's not going to look the best, but who cares if your stream has 10 frames of lag? It doesn't make a difference. You could actually, for real cheap, have a zero lag, amazing experience and still speedrun and record it as well.
I completely agree. And it's obvious. It's one of the most. It's getting a little less common because of the RetroTink and some others that have been made it a little more or less expensive. But it's by far was one of the most common setups. Was you send composite to your CRT that you found down the street, somebody was thrown out, and then you said you upscale it to send it, and because you don't care at that point. So. I think it's a really good point though, and it's, but thankfully, I have an OSSC, but I also purchased a RetroTink recently. It was gonna be my travel thing back when I was actually traveling for work, but it does such a simple task so well, and that's it's funny that an innovation is doing something a little bit more simpler like that, and it's less expensive, and it works really, really, really well, and it's something you can get up and running with right away.
It's funny because a lot of the super nerds when that first released was like, oh, it compresses the colors to 422. Who the heck would want that? And it's like, okay, what's the alternative? And like a very short period of time later, everybody was like, fuck it, we love the RetroTink. This is the best thing ever. And it's awesome. It's zero lag. It's properly priced. It's for the quantities they make them in. You can't really get them any cheaper than that. So it's, it's an awesome product.
Is there something, so minus the thing that you can't talk about that we may be seeing in a future video, is there a device or something out there that you would like to see the industry or somebody create or invent that you don't currently have?
Yeah, there's a long list. And if any of my developer friends are listening, they're all groaning right now. They're all audibly going, fuck, is he going to talk about that thing he asked me to do yesterday? I haven't even started it yet. But yes, there's a ton of stuff. And I'm constantly bothering everybody I know. And I'm lucky enough to know a ton of people, but it is at the point now where if I see something in the market that we need, or if I see something that's not as good as it could be, I just start contacting people right down the line. Like, all right, who's the best person for this? Oh, they're too busy, but this person still does it good. Oh, but this, or there's just some friends that I work really, really well with where they'll be the first to tell you I'm not the best for this, but I get the time to do it and I enjoy it. So I'll work with the best too. So yeah, there's a ton of things ranging from weird little things that maybe in the entire planet, only 1,000 people will ever be interested in. But when those 1,000 people see it, they're going to go, oh my God, this is the greatest thing that's ever been added to my setup. And, niche things like that, ranging from things that any gamer could go, yeah, you know what? I think I would like one of those. So yeah, there's just a ton of stuff that people are constantly working on and a ton of stuff I'd like to see. And I'm always excited about it. And, sometimes it's not, The best way to say it is I have a pretty good track record gauging what sells, and sometimes I think I underestimate, sometimes I overestimate, but I have a pretty good track record. So there hasn't been anybody that has like a warehouse of stuff sitting on the shelves because I guessed wrong. So
Epic Neon Ninja Monkey, a Wonder Swan output mod. Well, actually, I've kind of seen more Wonder Swan stuff than I ever have in the last like 6 months to a year.
somebody's already working on it.
There you go, Epic. Hang in there. Coming
Not
soon.
only is a video out mod being worked on, but there's also a few other additions to that. Check out Kevin Mellett. I can't remember what his Twitter is, but check out his Twitter. He's the guy that did the Hyperflash 32. So actually, check out my video on that, and then I have it linked right there. He's working on some Wonder Swan stuff that it's probably best if you just go to his Twitter and check it out. If I try to explain it, you're going to go, that's weird. But if you see the picture, you're going to go, that's weird. Like, I don't like that. Like,
so there's something that really was almost the reason that I contacted you and wanted to ask you about this. And that is, I'm somebody, I can't code. Not that I can't code. I've just never done it. I don't know how to code. I don't understand what the hardware is underneath the cases of a lot of these consoles and things like that. But I'm in my late 30s now. I have a job. I can buy stuff that these people make, but I'm wondering if there's a way that me, just Joe Blow on the street, can support retro development or somehow help in the innovation, even though I don't have the technical know-how to do so. Is something like that available?
yeah. So I know that this is going to sound really cheesy and like, I don't know, half the people listening might just turn it off after saying this, but the truth is, if you're in a spot in your life where you're able to help, you could just join a couple of Patreons for $1 a month and help support the people who do already have the coding knowledge. And if you find something where you go, that looks really interesting, I think I might be into that, you could always try to learn to code, try to learn to design PCBs, learn Verilog, and try to help reverse engineer chips. Like, there's a lot of stuff that if you enjoy the hobby that you could absolutely spend your time on. But for somebody like you who already does speedrunning, I mean this with all the respect in the world, I'd rather see you do more of what you're really good at. And I'm not trying to discourage you from coding. Right. If you feel like that would be a cool thing for you to do, by all means. But like, you're already good at something and you already got a following. So I just feel like if you're in the position to help, throw $1 a month at a couple of your favorite creators, or even creators that you think might have a chance of doing something cool, and then just keep on grinding through with your speedruns. And if you have the extra money, buy that, the new cable to plug into your OSSC to make your streams look even better than they already were. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of a cheesy answer, but it is my honest answer to that.
No, it's kind of I don't really need the OSSC Pro that may, whenever it finally gets released, but I feel like I really want to support the work that's being done there. So like, I'm going to probably do it just to support. This is a selfish question, but it's in the chat, so I'm going to bring it up. I've been recently playing through Pokemon Crystal on the Game Boy Player on GameCube. Thanks to Murdoch, he's loaned me his GameCube. I don't have one with a Game Boy Player. What's the best way to get the best signal out of there? Is there anything that can be nearly as good or close to as good without having to buy the official Nintendo GameCube Kubota cables?
Yeah, so there's the question very specifically was talking about using the Game Boy Player, and I think it was mentioned of the Game Boy interface software. And correct, if not, yes. I'm going to mention it. So I'll try to skip to the end for anybody that doesn't care. Don't have to bore them to death. But the GameCube had an adapter called the Game Boy Player that came with a disc that allowed you to plug cartridges in, and then you boot the disc, and its software allowed you to play Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Color games in either 480i or 480p, which mostly that's not what you would want in many cases. And if you wanted it in 480p, it would require the component cables that cost a fortune. Yeah. So somebody named Extrems came around and from scratch designed software called the Game Boy Interface that allows you to play these games in their original resolution with incredibly low latency, and depending on which of the many versions he has, which he keeps evolving, you could have a version with a ton of features. You could have one that's the lowest latency version possible. And I actually haven't played with it in a while because I've been so busy. I haven't played video games in a while. But being able to record a video of your speed run right on that SD card alone might be something that's an amazing feature. But the problem is that video output timings can be weird. So a lot of people have done things like they get just a basic NTSC GameCube, use S-Video out, and then pass it through a monitor into some kind of capture card. But some capture cards don't react well to it. You get loss of signal. Some people get the component cables and then run it through a data path direct. And there's just a bunch of different things that you could do to try to get it running. But trying to find a compatible display and capture card while you're in the original resolution can be tricky. And I mean this with all the love and respect in the world. Extrems is awesome. He helps me so much. But sometimes he's not the greatest at explaining stuff. Like, you'll ask a question and he'll give you a super smart nerd answer. And when you ask, what does that mean? He's like, what do you mean, what does it mean? I just told you. Like, it's right there. And it's like, so sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what to do to get this stuff tweaked. But if you go on to GameCube Forever forums, there's a bunch of people that have worked on CLI scripts that boot the game a specific way. If you're a GameCube user, especially if you're any kind of competitive gaming or just a power user, you got to use Swiss. A bunch of people work on that, including Extrems, Emu Kitted, a bunch of awesome people. But it is the Swiss Army knife of GameCube tools. And even if you don't mod anything, you boot to that first and still use original discs, but it allows you to do things like, force your resolution and aspect ratio, add, change regions, stuff like that. So it's absolutely something that I suggest everybody boot into Swiss. And even if you're going to the Game Boy interface, go to Swiss first and then go to that and then go from there. But unfortunately, it's going to be, everybody's setup's going to be different. So there isn't going to be one generic way to do the lowest latency that's compatible with your monitor, your capture card and everything else. I am a big fan of the Carby HDMI adapters because they're well made. Matt from Insurrection is a perfectionist to the point where sometimes his products are delayed because it's not quite as perfect as it could be. They've had some bumps in the road. Every company does, by the way, but their Carby generally has been pretty solid. And if you have the latest firmware revision on it, it performs really well. So, and it's fairly priced too. I think it's like $70 or $80, which is infinitely cheaper than the component cable, and it's already in HDMI, so you don't got to worry about it anymore.
I did appreciate your GBI video that you made. I know it's a few years old now, but it's 3 minutes long, and it showed here's the disc, here's the SD card reader, and it was pretty easy to see through that. This is, I'm sure you get this one a lot from APD Waldo. Will the Retro Roundtable have a reunion?
I don't know, John. Are you going to bring me more chicken this year? That's John who used to own Tasty Chicken in Brooklyn. So my shit talking is filled with love, shitty love.
Can we get some of that? Do you ship to California? I'm always on the lookout for good chicken. So. That's a good point too, Smoke Monster. That I spent like 2 days trying to figure out all the undocumented features in the Genesis VGM player. I'm right there with all of you. I'm so glad all these features are included for those of us that need to dig a little deeper. I'm speedrunner specifically because there are some things we need access to that just so we know we're having an authentic. We want to recreate the original hardware if we need to, whatever, blah blah blah. But also it can be a little bit complicated if there's not proper documentation.
So can I ask you a question? Can I flip this thing around? Tool-assisted speedruns.
Yes.
Now, somebody suggested to me a long time ago, and I just have not had the time to follow up. But I often show footage of games side by side to show, here's this scaler, here's this enhancement. And I often show the same footage over and over because things like the Super Mario World title screen has red, green, and blue colors. There's movement. Like it's an excellent example. But a lot of people respectfully are like, I'm tired of looking at the damn Super Mario World title screen. Can you just program a run so that you could press a button and just run the same thing on, every time that you want to do an example? And I have no clue how to do anything like that. How hard is it to set up? Because this wouldn't be a speed run. This would be going through a level of a game where where I play the level 10 times and pick the one that doesn't suck, that has movement on the screen. You see all the colors. Like, how hard would it actually be for me to set something like that up?
Well, you've used emulators before, so that's obviously the first thing that you would do. Dog Developer might jump in here too because he knows a lot more about this than I do. I've had many taskers or tool-assisted speedrun people on the podcast. In fact, I'm in the middle of a show doing one right now. And BizHawk is the place you want to go, and it's actually, as somebody who had no experience with it at all, I was able to get it up and running pretty quick where I was already programming in inputs that would be done the same way every single time. That's the whole idea of a tool-assisted speedrun. And it was surprisingly easy to get up and going, but to make it do what I wanted it to do over and over again took a bit more time. That's where you'd probably be spending the bulk of your time. There's a really cool device out there. It's called an not action. I was about to say action replay. That's the thing for GameCube. It's called but it is a console replay device. And the idea is it takes inputs and then reproduces them as a controller into whatever console you want to put it in. So if you actually wanted to do this on real hardware, exactly, Dog Developer TaskBot does this, that'd be something that you'd want. Oh, there you go, Store Task, there you go, okay. There's a link right there. So it takes a little bit to learn, but just like anything else, especially in our community where a lot of this stuff is not exactly plug and play all the time. So it takes a little bit, but I wouldn't say anything too complicated. Definitely not above some of the testing you would do, like just setting OSSC settings up or timings on that. So
yeah, I just saved a link that was posted in the chat. Cool. I think I might reach out to them and ask, can I buy one of these? I never ask for anything for free. There's been once that I've ever actually demanded something. It's because I keep reviewing a product that I can't stand, and I was like, just send me one of these things. I don't like it, and I'm selling them for you, so I deserve one of them. And but yeah, I want to buy the product, then I'll reach out to them, and maybe I could even do an interview with them too after I have my experience with it, and because I think I've always been fascinated by tool-assisted speedruns.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's something that I would never be good enough to do as a hobby, but I think I would love to learn more about it and then just use it so that every time I do a video, I could have new and fresh footage to show people where I don't have to use the same game over and over to demonstrate something.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where people have found uses for tool-assisted speedruns in many different facets. It's not necessarily just for completing a game as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. We have been able to find new and exciting things that we didn't even know existed in certain games, certain secrets, things. There are kind of infinite amounts of uses for some of these things, and then to be able to bring it onto a console so that you could actually, we call it the process of console verification, but the fact that even exists is rad, because then you could bring it home to your, the normal person could use it, not just somebody with some technical knowledge and things like that, which I found really, really, really cool. So yeah, and if you want, I could hook you up with the people who actually make this thing, so I can send them.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love an introduction if you don't mind, because it's always weird. Sometimes it's like, hey, I don't know if you've heard of RetroRGB.com, but I'm that fat guy, and I'd love to talk to you. And I get so many responses like, I don't watch YouTube, and it's like, nope, I am on YouTube, but that's not what I do. Yeah, so an introduction would be nice.
Well, and I got to say, that's one of the coolest things I've found about the retro community is the diversity that is involved there. So the guy who works on TaskBot, we'll just use him as an example. He didn't create this device, but one of the devices that's on there, he is a developer in his real life. He's not just doing full-time retro hardware, development type of thing. And I found that we are from all walks of life as part of this. We enjoy playing these old games. And I think you're, not to toot your own horn or anything, but your site has been this invaluable resource and continues to be that way because of all the reporting you're doing. I don't even know how you get some of the scoops that you get, and just finding some of these things that are, because you report on emulation too, which I think is so cool. It's not just about the hardware, and I find that, I just thank you, I guess is what I try to get to for doing all this work and stuff.
Thank you very much. And that is one of the many misconceptions, is people think I somehow hate software emulation because I love original hardware. It's that's like saying you must hate cake because you like chocolate chip cookies. Why can't I just fucking like cookies and cake, man? There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I love software emulation. I think when used in the right context, it's beyond amazing and could do things that will never be possible on original hardware. So
it's almost rule number one of speedrunning that anybody who asks, hey, how do I learn how to speedrun a game? Well, first of all, don't spend any money. Use whatever you have in front of you first, and then try to figure out if this is something you enjoy doing, and then you could take those next steps. But I feel like that's kind of been your approach to a lot of the videos that you put out there about products and things like that. Use what you have first, try that out, and then go from there,
Yeah, the RetroTink Mini, funny, when I put that video together, I was doing a bunch of other things, and I was like, Mike asked if I would want to do the video. I was like, of course, I love doing RetroTink videos. I might not be able to get as much time on it as the other ones, though, because I'm in the middle of something else. And he was like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And as I dug in, I realized, like, this isn't about the RetroTink Mini. This is about getting started in retro gaming. And while I'm going to focus it on the product, this is my trial run for my getting started video that I want to start working on in 2021. And I think one of the first thing I said was, like, if you just want to experience these games, go get a CRT for free and then go from there. And if you decide I really want to play it on a flat panel, then get the RetroTink Mini, and here's why you need that, and here's why the Mini is the best option by far compared to this junk, that junk, here's why they're junk, etc. But yeah, I mean, that's what I always say starting out is, like, if you've never played the game before, try the cheapest or free way to play it.
Yeah.
And then if you're really into it, go from there. Pick up an original console and a CRT. So less than $100, you're already started. Or, if you have no room for that, get one of the classic consoles. The NES, SNES, Genesis Mini, whatever. It's not the PlayStation one. That one's terrible. But so, yeah, it's there's a lot of right answers. There's also a bunch of wrong answers too. But there's a lot of right ways to do it. So.
Well, and I guess as we start to wrap this thing up, you mentioned it, but like, do you find time to game nowadays with the amount of work that you're doing?
I love music so much. One of the things in life that I'm actually not shitty at is playing that V guitar back there, and I think I've played it in all of January. I think I've picked it up twice. So it's no, I have no time anymore. It's one of these things where I love doing RetroRGB, but to do something like this and make a living on it, it's every waking moment of every single day. And even like you're watching a movie and you get up to pee, like you're checking your phone and responding to messages and then go back to the movie, like it never ends. And I love it, but and I if I had a choice, I would do this rather than anything else. But the last 2 times I played games was doing the live stream of the Atari 2600. I guess the last 3 times for testing for the mini MVS video, which holy crap, that came out even better than I thought. It's what a crystal clear Neo Geo output. And then when I did the CPS HDMI video, I just had this weird moment. It's so cheesy, but it's 100% true. And I even talked about it in the video where I'm playing, I forgot the name of the game. It's some really cool shooter on my 65-inch OLED TV through HDMI from an original CPS2 arcade board. And like Marcus had programmed something in where depending on your receiver, it might treat it as surround sound, it might not, whatever. But it just so happened that like I'm surrounded by bullets with this crazy shooter game, and I ended up I only was supposed to like get footage for a few minutes, and I ended up playing that for like 45 minutes. Like I can't. I'll rather delay the video than stop this. This is so freaking cool. I'm not going to end it. So.
But yeah, exactly. That's the world we live in, though. Like, how freaking cool is that? That's the world we live in now, where you can do this wacky. I mean, who would have thought that would have been possible 10 years ago?
Yeah. Epic Neon Ninja Monkey. Awesome name, by the way. It's a mouthful, but awesome name. But yeah, the latest thing I did, if you want to hear me play, is my friend Mark, the lead guitarist from Answer Infinity, had me on to do like a fun thing. I'll try to drop the link with in the chat, but. Mark, there's been a couple times where I really was like, oh, I might as well just quit playing. Like, I don't have time anymore. And the past 2 times I was starting to get a little iffy on it. Mark sent me a drum track and was like, he knew what he was doing too. So thanks to Mark. But he was just like, hey man, you think maybe you could drop a rhythm guitar lead on top of this or something? And it was and it ended up getting me sucked in, and I really enjoyed the heck out of it. But he sent me a drum track and was like, write a rhythm guitar thing for this and I'll solo over it. But I guess he forgot it was me. So now of course it's like a really weird, like overly complicated. It's how I play rhythm guitar. So it was pretty cool. Let me I don't know what the hell. I don't know why I can't find it. I'm gonna try to Google it one more time, and then if not, I'll just put the link in the chat later. But
I know the guitars have been in the background for a little while now in your videos, so we've seen them on the podcast, on your podcast and everything. And it's like, oh man, if you get a chance, that'd be kind of cool.
Oh my God, this was from August. This felt like a week ago. Oh, no wonder I can't get any other hobbies done. I thought I just did this. And in fact, Ronnie, one of the writers from RetroRGB, did the bass in this. Ronnie is a professional musician, and he is phenomenal. He's freaking awesome. And the plan was Mark already did the video when he was going to just program the bass or something. And when Ronnie stepped up and did it, we were like, oh, this is even better. And I said, all right, well, we're going to have like an epic guitar battle. And I'm going to have Renee from DB Electronics, who's a ridiculous lead guitar player. Like, we're going to do our version versus your version and have like a mock, enemy battle type of thing. And then Renee got really busy, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to that next week. And apparently that was August. So in September, I was supposed to have the sequel to that up on my channel, but hopefully I could pull Renee out from retirement for a day so get him to record that guitar lead, and we could post another one. But that was fun.
On a completely different kind of tangent, but related to this, I have a lot of musician friends, and it's been great over the last 10, 20 years now how much soundtracks have kind of evolved in video games. In retro style, all the way up to the modern stuff. And I've just seen a lot more of my friends who are musicians and composers have work that they can actually, sustain their living by composing for, apps, independent. There's just a lot of calls nowadays for people who do music or who do audio, all those kind of things. And it's been great I know it's still a competitive market, but it's great to see that those jobs are available to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the song that opens up every video I do is a song I wrote in 2014 or something. And at one point, I think I went on Fiverr.com and had somebody turn it into a video game song. And of course, it was $100 and something because it's how it works on Fiverr. But
exactly.
But that's what you hear. That's a song I wrote in 2014 or something, and a year or two later I had a video game version done, and that's what you hear in every one of them. So it's cool that I think the guy was somewhere in Eastern Europe, and it's just awesome that somebody could just have a decent audio interface, grab something not shitty like the Motu, and then plug right in, and now you could have a pro recording studio right here.
So, Bob, thanks so much for taking so much time today and chatting through all this stuff. I really, besides a big thank you for you and your site, but also just for taking the time. And it's fascinating to kind of see where you come from and how that plays a part in RetroRGB.com and all that kind of stuff. A quick, if people aren't familiar with you, I know the site does tutorials, they do news. Where can people find you and also RetroRGB on the web?
Everything at RetroRGB. So whether it's the website, every social media, although really YouTube and Twitter are the ones I've spent most time on, but that's basically it. Just everywhere at RetroRGB. Check out the website. Everything I do is always linked through the website because social media comes and goes, but the website's always going to be there. So that's probably the best way to get linked to everything else. And thank you very much for the kind words, by the way. It was a lot of fun being on. I enjoyed myself, enjoyed my couple of Yinglings. I quit drinking for the first few weeks of January just for weight loss, so now 2 beers hit a lot harder than they did a month ago.
Okay, so true story. I did that myself. I laid off beer for, I think it was 1 or 2 months. And then the first one you have, it's almost like lights out. I was like, what the hell? This did not affect me this way before.
It's almost not fun the first time. And then I'm right back. But
and then it's easy. Yeah, it's no problem.
Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. All those things go a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter at LatMackey, or you can also join the LatMackey Discord, where we have a sequence break channel. We talk about guests, we have questions. It's really interactive, really fun. Please feel free to stop on by. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.